Well, welcome to Nothing Exempt. I am Nick Pardini, and I'm with my co-host Brian Piotr, and we have a special guest today, Jim Rogers, who's an international investor and the author of the book Street Smarts. Before we get start with the interview, I'd just like to mention the best way that you can get in touch with the show is hitting us up on our Reddit, Nothing Exempt, or on Twitter at Nothing Exempt. And just our sponsor, which is the Cause and Effect Report, which is a macro trading letter that helps investors navigate the markets. You can find that at causeandeffectreport.com. Now, Brian, let's start with our first question for Jim.
Hello, Jim. I wanted to let you know that I've been a fan of yours. I feel like since I was a tiny kid, I've been watching videos of yours since YouTube started, and I'm a big fan. So I wanted to start off with something that wasn't a financial question for you. If you were 25 today, what would be the ride a motorcycle around the world adventure that you would have in 2018?
Well, I would, that's what I would do, if I could afford it. When I was 25, I could not afford to ride a motor. I couldn't afford much of anything, much less to ride a motorcycle around the world. But if I could afford it and I were 25, I would set out. A great learning experience about lots of things. You learn about yourself, you learn about life, you learn about the world, you learn about just about everything.
So 30 years later, it's still the best adventure that can be had?
Well, for me, yes. I mean, I don't know. Some people might want to fly a plane around the world. That doesn't have any appeal to me at all. Some people might want to, who knows what, might want to try out for the Olympics or something. But for me, the adventure that I wanted was to see the world close to the ground.
I thought that was a great adventure, and if anybody's listening wants to read about it, they certainly can. Just type in Jim Rogers into Amazon. I bet it's on there.
Yeah, the book is called Investment Biker.
Yep, exactly right. Good for you, Nick. Give that man a raise.
All right, the first investing related question I have. I know that you have been very bullish on agriculture, and I've shared some similar views on the agriculture trade in the past. The biggest counter argument that I've found to that is that the whole average age of the farmer thesis and the supply of farmers is not as relevant due to the fact that farms are getting more corporate and on larger scales and are more like family businesses where the quote-unquote farmer is actually just a business owner that operates a larger farm done by machines or employed labor. What do you think that why do you think that the average age of a farmer matters if farms are getting increasingly commercialized?
Well, somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to actually, even if you're just sitting there pressing computers, somebody has to have the knowledge and the time to press the computer. It's not gone that far yet by any means, but you got to have human beings doing it, or you don't have any farm.
Okay, well, if that's it for farming, Nick, I got a question. I know that you worked with George Soros when you were younger, and this isn't a difficult question at all. I've worked with difficult people. I was just wondering. Well, I'm not saying he's difficult. I'm just saying that he's different than you are. Did you two work together with different personalities, or did you have any problems or success collaborating with each other?
Brian, that was 40 years ago. You might as well ask me about my first wife. So.
Yeah.
I mean,
how was she?
Not,
Is she nice?
Yeah. Well, actually, it's interesting. I ran into her the other day by accident, and all I could think was, my gosh, thank goodness I'm not married to her anymore. You know, what a terrible life I would have had if I were spent all these years married to her. And at the time, I didn't want to split. You know, I was unhappy about the split. So things move on and people change. So, I mean, you know, who knows what was going on. I do know that we both worked well together. We were in the market trying to make money, and markets, I should say, and we did.
Yeah, and speaking of your days at Quantum, like the hedge fund world has changed a lot since then due to a lot more regulations and also a lot tougher risk metrics. Like right now, people, like if you are a hedge fund manager and you have one down quarter, you could have half of your money redeemed. Like there was recently a fund that just spun off a Passport, which got all of its money redeemed and was forced to shut down in less than a year. Like the tolerance for any sort of drawdowns has completely disappeared, whereas back in the old days, people were allowed to take a lot more risk and therefore have more swings in their portfolio. If you tried to start something on your own today, like you did with Quantum years ago, do you think you would still be able to have done it?
Well, back in those days, there were only like 5 hedge funds in the world. Certainly, only 5 international hedge funds, not even 5 international hedge funds. So it wasn't a big deal. Nobody was thinking too much about things like that. I'm sure now I read that there are like 30,000 hedge funds now. Well, Nick, I know we don't have 30,000 smart 29-year-olds in the world, so that may be part of the situation. You've got too much competition, too many people. Some undoubtedly are incompetent, passing themselves off as competent. But in the old days, it wasn't. There were only a few people in the business, and apparently most of us were reasonably competent. Some did close. I do remember Martin Biggs went into the hedge fund business, and he had to close. I doubt it was that order, but there were some that did close, although there weren't many doing it at all.
Well, that leads me to another question following up with that. Over the years, technology's obviously changed the way that people physically trade things and how quickly they can do it. But has it had any effect on how you analyze the markets themselves? Are you looking at them differently because there's technology supporting the market?
No, there's always been technology, believe it or not. Once upon a time, they had ticker tapes, and once upon a time, they had young men sitting by a blackboard marking up the prices. If you go back 100 years ago, once upon a time, they didn't even have ticker tapes. So technology has always changed. Dow Jones came along and changed a lot of things by giving us news and information. So we've always had information and technology, and things have always gotten faster. About all it's done, Brian, as far as it has changed the speed. We all get information a lot faster now, which of course makes a difference because the markets react a lot faster. But no matter how much technology there is, Brian, you still have to have judgment. 100 people can get the same information at exactly the same moment. Most of them will not make the right judgment. What technology has to do is figure out a way to solve our judgment problems. Now, artificial intelligence may do that, except for the fact that when everybody has artificial intelligence, then everybody's going to be doing the same thing, and nobody's going to be successful.
I feel like the algorithms in the market today are the opposite of artificial intelligence. Sometimes it's the artificial stupidity that's moving the markets.
Well, we will find out in the end. It's very simple. You either make money, or you lose money, and whether you do it by throwing darts or you have a genius computer, doesn't matter to the market. They want people to make money.
So, I mean, what do you think then about the trend to indexing? And do you think that because a lot of funds are being either forced to, or investment professionals are leaving the business because they can't compete with the low fees of Vanguard, that it will actually create a better opportunity for active management, since there'll be less people analyzing the market from that point of view and more things just moving direction of the sector ETF or the market index, irrespective of fundamentals?
Well, it certainly gives great opportunities for people who are willing to take the time and energy to do research, fundamental research, especially of things that are not in an index. Nearly everything is in an index these days, but there are many things that are still not in indexes. And if there's somebody who's willing to take the time and the effort to analyze or find those entities, I know there's great opportunities. But as far as the indexing is concerned, nearly everything is indexed, and it's getting more and more that way. I use them. It's a lazy man's way to invest, but I use them too because I'm lazy, and it's going more and more. One of the things that will happen, Nick, when we do have a bear market again, it's going to be even worse, partly because everything is indexed. So we all start selling. We're all going to start selling the same things, and those will go down a great, great, great deal. Whether they're sound or not is irrelevant. It's just that they're in the index, and when people start dumping the indexes, that's what they're going to dump. The things that are not in the indexes, of course, will not do as badly, partly because they didn't do as well, going up.
And that thing about indexing going up, 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 and people forgetting what it's like to be in a bear market. Having seen what happened in 2008 with bailouts of large banks and automotive companies, is it too far of a stretch to think that central banks could bail out the market, like the whole S&P, like the whole NASDAQ, that they would step in and bail out everybody?
Mainly to protect pensioners, in my opinion.
Well, the pensioners are the ones who are very vulnerable right now. There are plenty of pension funds that are underwater, as you know, and when the bear market comes, they're going to be even more underwater. You say bail out. I'm not quite sure how you mean. I mean, is the government going to go and buy stocks? Conceivably, it's been done in the past. You know, at one point, the Japanese government went and bought up the Japanese market. All of the Japanese brokers were broke, and the Japanese government bought the Japanese Nikkei average and saved it and drove it up. And then over the next few years, they sold it out, and everything was okay, depending on if you define that definition of okay as okay. So it has happened before. Governments have stepped in to bail out people. It certainly happened in America in 2008. You know, we bailed out various and sundry people. Including, well, I won't name the names, which in my view was a serious mistake, but they've already done it in the U.S. in one way or another. Back when, what was it called, long-term capital management collapsed back in 1998 it was. Alan Greenspan at the Federal Reserve went in and did everything he could to save the markets. He didn't buy up shares, but he did everything he could to make sure the stock market stopped going down. So sure, and pension plans somewhere along the line, I'm sure what they're going to do is they're going to come in and say to the pensioners, oh gosh, you're having trouble in the markets. What we're going to do is we're going to take over your pension plan and we're going to give you long-term government bonds at 2% interest. This is for your own good. It's another way to bail out the government and make the situation worse rather than better.
Now, leads me to my next question is we're going to talk more and more on emerging markets. And I know you've been a bull in China, you've moved to Singapore, and you've raised your daughters to speak Mandarin. And I was wondering what catalyst that would happen in China would change your mind about the country's long-term projection.
Oh, I guess if they run out of water, if they don't solve their water problem, they have a huge water problem. I mean, they're spending billions to solve their water problem, but you know, I've traveled around the world a couple of times, and I've seen countries can survive war and civil war and famine and drought and all kinds of stuff. But if the water disappears, you disappear. I've seen whole civilizations which disappeared because the water disappeared. Anything else countries can recover from and survive. The water goes, you're gone, and China does. By the way, India has a worse water problem, but and they're not working on it nearly as diligently. But China has a huge water problem. I would suspect they're going to solve it because they're spending so much money, and there are solutions. But water would end the whole. Would end it. Water. If you run out of water, no matter who you are and where you are, your story's over.
What do you think about
anything else you can recover from?
What do you think about the gender imbalance in China? How that affects the macro implications of the country?
Well, it's a huge situation, and not just in China, in all of Asia. You know, Korea's got a horrendous problem. I don't know where they're going to get. One reason they're going to merge with North Korea so they can get girls. You know, the South Koreans are running out of females pretty rapidly. I don't know where the Koreans will get girls unless they go to Los Angeles or Queens or something. Otherwise, there are not any Korean females, except in North Korea, of course. So China's got that problem, and it is certainly changing society. The status of women is going to change dramatically. anything that's in short supply increases in value, as you know. 1,000 years ago in Europe, the same thing happened. We had a shortage of females, and the status of women went straight through the roof. In those days, boys' families paid the dowry to get a spouse. In much of Asia, although less and less, if a girl gets married, the family pays a dowry to the boy's family. Well, that 1,000 years ago changed it. It was the boy's family that paid the dowry because everybody needed women so much. Women ran city-states, women ran companies, women ran all sorts of things. Now, the imbalance changed, and it went back to the situation we have in the West today. But no, that is changing in Asia and China now as we speak.
And another problem that China seems to be trying to deal with very quickly is the pollution problem, and they're switching over to cleaner energy, quote unquote, including natural gas. And this has put a tremendous amount of pressure on the ability of the world to supply them with natural gas and other clean burning energy. So do you think that the world is going to be able to meet their needs, even if it's Iran and everywhere else that might have embargoes to feed the beast? Because the cost of electricity is such a huge factor when incorporating the cost of a product to produce it and ship it around the world. How do you see China solving that electricity power problem?
So you raised 2 or 3 points. One is the pollution problem. China is filthy. That's why I don't live in China, because it's so polluted. But they're spending a lot of money to clean it up. So they're great opportunities for whoever's going to clean up China. They're going to be fortunes made by, if we have a big depression, people cleaning up China won't even know it because they're making so much money cleaning up China because it's such a mess. As far as the energy, they're spending a lot of money on nuclear energy. They're spending a lot of money on wind power, solar power. And as far as natural gas, well, there's natural gas in the world, in Russia and Iran, where China can get and will get energy supplies. And aside, you talked about the sanctions. Well, America's policy is having negative effects in one sense because it's driving Russia, China, and Iran all together. If you go to Moscow airport now, you see Chinese everywhere. 5 years ago, there were no Chinese in Moscow airport. But now the Chinese and the Russians are being forced together, and the Iranians are being forced together with the Russians and the Chinese. And this is not good for America in the end, because those are massive nations with lots of ability and lots of brains.
Yeah, outside of China, what other investments are you looking at from a macro perspective?
Well, every day I look at something, either whether I know it or not, because if something's happening in the world and it has a potential change, then I want to be aware of it. I'm lazier than I used to be, and I don't, work at it as diligently as I used to. But just reading the newspaper, you're looking at something, whether you know it or not. Agriculture, China, North Korea. North Korea, once this is resolved, Korea is going to be the most exciting country in the world because North Korea has lots of cheap, disciplined, educated labor with vast natural resources, and South Korea has huge amounts of capital and expertise. About 80 million people right on the Chinese border. It's going to be an unbelievably exciting country. Japan is against it because Japan cannot compete with that nation. Japan's got serious problems, making Japan go into decline. Japan's doing everything they can to oppose. There's nothing they can do about it, and their opposition, they come up with various and sundry side issues. Basically, they're trying to derail the process. But it's not going to derail. China's for it, North Korea's for it, South Korea's for it, Russia's for it. Looks like even America's for it now. So it's going to happen, and it's going to be a very, very exciting.
Absolutely agree with you. I got nothing more to add to North Korea becoming a friend to the world again instead of being an enemy in the paper and an enemy that just is kind of walled off to the world. It's a wonderful thing to see their borders opened if it happens.
I'm glad you said an enemy in the paper because a lot of it really is just propaganda rather than reality.
Yeah, and then what are your thoughts then about the markets in the U.S. and Latin America? And what are the catalysts you think that would cause sentiment in the U.S. to shift away from the bullish sentiment that's been dominating in the last 9 years or so?
Well, you just said one of the one of the answers. It has been 9 years or so, and historically, it's the longest, if not or one of the longest bull markets ever. Normally, historically, we have dislocations more frequently than this, so we're overdue time-wise. Doesn't mean it has to happen. It could be 18 years. Who knows? I certainly don't. But we're getting along in the tooth. Interest rates are starting to rise. Prices are certainly high. Things aren't cheap. Many reasons have their market probably within the next year or so. These things don't happen in a day, though. In fact,
Hey, Jim, I think you're cutting out.
if you look back at 2008, in 2007, Iceland went bankrupt. Well, nobody even noticed. Nobody knew there was an Iceland or that it could go bankrupt. And then Ireland went bankrupt, and then Bear Stearns went bankrupt, and then Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. And by then, 2 years later, everybody knew, hey, something's wrong here. And that was called a bear market. So they usually take a while. They evolve, they decline, and eventually everybody catches on to what's going on. So for all I know, maybe it's already started. Maybe we've seen Latvia go bankrupt. We've seen major Indian banks go bankrupt. We've seen things happening, which may be the initial spark, which will start the next bear market. I don't know. I'm not good at market timing.
If anybody was good at market timing, they would be richer than Jeff Bezos right now. But as far as potential sparks, the tariffs, is that noise or is that one of them?
No, I mean, if the trade war evolves, and it looks like it is, Mr. Trump had the people around him that he has pulled into his inner circle over the last year and a half. Nearly all of them are keen on trade wars. Nearly all of them have their whole careers have advocated trade wars. So it looks like it's going to happen. I mean, even if this particular bout, if there's a relief and something happens to say, oh, it's okay now, when things get really bad in the next year or two or whenever they do, Trump will then revert to trade wars because that's his instinct. That's what he believes is a solution to many problems. So we're going to have a trade war. Nobody's ever won a trade war. Mr. Trump doesn't, either he doesn't know history or he doesn't care. He thinks he's smarter than history. He thinks that he can control history, and he doesn't care what history shows about trade wars. So you should be worried.
Nick, do you want to ask one more question and close this out?
Yeah, my final question is about Europe. What do you think about what is going on with the Italian situation in terms of broader systemic risks? And also, do you think that Draghi is intentionally holding off tightening, mainly to protect the Italian public budget?
Well, the euro is not Europe. The EU and the euro are not going. Two different things, but both will change. They will not survive as we know them now. It's already starting. See what's happening, not just in Italy, but other countries too. When things go wrong, people always look for scapegoats. Always look for somebody to blame, and blame the politicians. Blame the foreigners. They always blame the foreigners. Foreigners have different skin color, different language, different religion, different food. Foreigners smell bad. Their food smells bad. I mean, all of this stuff has happened so many times in history, and it will happen again. Some countries are split up. Already seen some countries in Central Europe splitting up, and you'll see more. So it's going to cause. Said we're going to have a bad bear market the next time around. One of the things that will contribute to it will be more turmoil in Europe. I think. are getting and will get angrier and angrier as things go on. When the economy goes wrong, everybody's looking for somebody to blame. They never blame themselves.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming on our show. Jim, if there's any way for the listeners to come and find you, how would you prefer they do that?
It's not really any way other than, I mean, you know, I have a website, but that's just my trip around the world. It does tell where I'm speaking. It lists my speaking. I just find me on the internet, I guess. Find me on YouTube like you. I guess the internet's the only way. I don't have a job. I don't have a company. I don't have anything I'm selling. So there's really not much way to do it.
Okay. Well, thank you again for coming on the show. I hope that our paths can cross sometime again in the future. And I hope you are looking forward to another muggy 80-degree day in Singapore.
I'm looking forward to another time with Nick and Brian. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, we'll hit you up the next time we're out in Southeast Asia.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.